There are nights when the mind becomes a courtroom and every anxious thought rises to testify against your peace. One voice reminds you of what you lost, another whispers of what may still be taken, another points toward tomorrow as though it were a dark forest filled with unseen dangers. And somewhere in the middle of all this noise, your soul grows weary. Not because you are weak, but because you were never designed to carry the weight of the entire universe upon your shoulders. There is a strange habit among human beings. We attempt to play the role of protector over things that were never truly ours to control. We lie awake trying to hold together futures we cannot see, people we cannot change, circumstances we cannot predict, and outcomes we cannot command. We clutch at life with trembling fingers, believing that if we loosen our grip for even a moment, everything will collapse into ruin. Yet the tragedy is not merely that we worry. The tragedy is that we imagine our worry accomplishes something noble. We mistake anxiety for responsibility. We believe that because a burden occupies our thoughts, we are somehow helping to solve it. But fear has never repaired a broken tomorrow. It has only stolen strength from today. There are people listening even now who have become exhausted from fighting invisible battles. Their smiles still appear in public, their routines continue, their conversations sound ordinary enough, but inwardly they are carrying storms no one sees. The heart becomes tired in a way the body cannot explain. One may sleep for 8 hours and wake as though he has wrestled through the night with shadows. And perhaps the deepest pain of all is this feeling that one must carry everything alone. The soul was made for dependence upon something eternal, yet modern man often treats dependence as weakness. He would rather collapse beneath unbearable pressure than admit he was never meant to be self-sufficient. He admires the image of the solitary hero while quietly dying under the burden of isolation. But there comes a moment when heaven interrupts the illusion. A moment when the weary spirit finally realizes that control is not the same thing as trust. There are matters too large for human hands. There are wounds too deep for human wisdom. There are tangled roads no mortal intellect can straighten. And strangely enough, this realization is not the beginning of despair. It is the beginning of peace. For peace does not arrive when life becomes predictable. Peace arrives when the soul understands that even what it cannot predict is still held by one who sees beyond time itself. The human creature desperately wants explanations. He wants to know why the door closed, why the prayer delayed, why the suffering prolonged, why the relationship fractured, why the opportunity vanished. He imagines that if he could simply understand the reason behind his pain, his anxiety would disappear. But understanding alone has never healed the heart. One may fully comprehend a tragedy and still be crushed beneath it. What the soul truly longs for is not merely explanation but assurance. Assurance that the darkness is not final. Assurance that suffering is not meaningless. Assurance that there is intelligence behind the chaos and mercy behind the mystery. A child sleeping during a thunderstorm does not understand meteorology. He cannot explain lightning or predict rainfall. Yet he rests because he trusts the arms carrying him. In much the same way, the heart finds rest not through mastering every detail of existence, but through surrendering. G to the one who already has. There are burdens you were never intended to carry into the future. Some of you have carried grief so long it has become part of your identity. Others carry guilt like chains hidden beneath their clothing. Some carry fear of failure, fear of abandonment, fear of sickness, fear of financial ruin, fear that the worst thing imaginable is waiting just beyond the horizon. And fear is persuasive because it speaks in the language of certainty. It does not say, perhaps disaster will come. It says, it will happen. Fear paints tomorrow with dark colors and then convinces you the painting is prophecy. It transforms imagination into torment. Yet how many disasters has the anxious mind predicted that never arrived? How many sleepless nights were spent trembling before futures that dissolved by morning? Anxiety often behaves like a false prophet, speaking doom with complete confidence while possessing no authority whatsoever. The soul grows distorted when it stares too long at imagined catastrophes. One begins interpreting every silence as rejection, every delay as failure, every hardship as punishment. Life becomes heavy not only because of real suffering, but also because of the pain and suffering of others. That because of anticipated suffering. And this is where trust becomes an act of spiritual rebellion. To trust in the middle of uncertainty is not denial. It is courage. It is the refusal to let fear become your master. It is the quiet declaration that darkness does not possess ultimate authority over your story. There are seasons when heaven appears silent. Prayers seem to rise no higher than the ceiling. The heart asks questions and hears no immediate response. During such moments, many conclude they have been abandoned, but silence is not absence. A seed buried beneath the ground may feel forgotten, yet hidden within the darkness a miracle is unfolding. There are workings of providence too subtle for immediate recognition. The human eye sees fragments while eternity sees the whole design. We become distressed because we judge unfinished stories as though they were completed ones. Imagine a man walking through a vast cathedral under construction. He sees dust, noise, scattered stone, shattered pieces upon the floor. To him it appears chaotic and ugly. But the architect sees arches not yet raised, windows not yet placed, beauty not yet revealed. The worker with limited vision calls it disorder, while the designer calls it progress. So often we mistake divine construction for divine neglect. Some of the greatest transformations occur in hiddenness. The roots of mighty trees grow silently underground long before branches appear above the surface. Likewise, strength of soul is often formed in unseen places through waiting, disappointment, endurance, and surrender. It is easy to trust when life unfolds according to desire, but faith that depends entirely upon favorable circumstances is fragile indeed. The deeper trust is born when the storm remains, and yet the heart slowly learns not to panic. There is a profound difference between being troubled and being destroyed. Even the strongest souls experience anguish. Even the faithful wrestle with uncertainty. The issue is not whether fear knocks upon the door of the heart. The issue is whether fear is invited to sit upon the throne. Many people imagine peace as the absence of conflict, yet some of the calmest souls in history walked through immense suffering. Their peace did not arise because life was painless. Their peace arose because they believed suffering itself could not separate them from eternal love. And perhaps this is the great secret hidden from anxious hearts. The future is not merely a sequence of random accidents. There is guidance even in places that appear directionless. There is purpose moving beneath events that seem meaningless. The mind obsessed with control finds this intolerable because it wishes to govern reality itself. But the soul that finally surrenders discovers something astonishing. What it feared losing was never capable of saving it in the first place. There comes liberation when a person finally says, "I cannot carry this anymore." Not because the burden instantly disappears, but because honesty has opened the door through which grace enters. Some of you have spent years pretending to be strong while inwardly unraveling. You have smiled in conversations while privately fighting despair. You have carried responsibilities beyond your strength because you feared disappointing others. And gradually your spirit has become like a house with cracked foundations, outwardly standing yet inwardly collapsing. But the human soul cannot survive indefinitely upon self-reliance alone. You were not created to be your own savior. There is one who does not grow exhausted by your fears, one who is not overwhelmed by the complexity of your situation, one who sees the entire landscape of your life at once. Every wound, every betrayal, every unanswered prayer, every hidden tear, every silent battle. And unlike human affection, divine love is not frightened away by weakness. People often hide their struggles because they fear rejection. They worry that if others truly saw the chaos within, they would turn away in disappointment. But the remarkable thing about divine mercy is that it moves toward brokenness rather than away from it. The weary are invited, the burdened are welcomed, the anxious are not despised. There is something profoundly healing about realizing you do not need to hold yourself together before approaching grace. Too many people believe they must first conquer their fears before they can find peace. But peace is not the reward for self-perfection. It is the gift given to those humble enough to admit their need. And so the exhausted soul slowly learns a new posture. Instead of clenching tightly around every uncertainty, it begins releasing them one by one. Not because answers have suddenly appeared, but because trust has been begun to grow larger than fear. This does not happen overnight. The anxious heart often attempts to reclaim the burdens it surrendered yesterday. Fear returns repeatedly, demanding attention. But each time the soul chooses trust again, something within it strengthens. A sailor does not command the storm. He cannot silence the wind or flatten the waves. Yet he can choose where to anchor. And the soul anchored in eternal reality survives tempests that would otherwise destroy it. There are moments ahead when you will be tempted to believe nothing is changing. You will look at your circumstances and see little evidence of progress. But much of life's deepest work occurs invisibly. Healing often begins beneath the surface long before emotions recognize it. Do not underestimate quiet transformations. A heart learning trust is already experiencing a miracle. Even now, some of the pressures crushing you may eventually become the very places through which wisdom enters your life. Not because suffering is good in itself, but because redemption has a mysterious ability to bring beauty out of brokenness. The stone that sharpens the blade is not gentle. The fire that purifies gold is not comfortable. Yet there are qualities of soul that cannot emerge except through trial. Still, the weary heart must remember this. Hardship is not proof of abandonment. Many assume that if they were truly loved by heaven, their road would remain smooth. Yet some of the most sacred journeys pass through wilderness. The night sky itself reveals stars invisible during the brightness of day. There are truths learned only in darkness. One day you may look back upon this very season, the sleepless nights, the unanswered questions, the trembling uncertainty, and realize that while you believed everything was falling apart, something deeper was actually being held together. For the soul often measures reality by appearance, while eternity works through processes hidden from ordinary sight. A man standing beside winter trees may assume life has vanished from them completely. Their branches are bare, their beauty concealed, their fruit nowhere to be found. Yet beneath the frozen surface, life remains active in ways invisible to hurried eyes. The roots continue their quiet labor beneath the soil, while the season itself prepares for renewal. So too, there are winters of the spirit where nothing seems alive anymore. Prayer feels cold, hope appears distant, even joy becomes difficult to remember. One moves through daily routines carrying an inward heaviness that words cannot fully explain. The world continues speaking loudly around him while something inside grows terribly silent, and yet silence is not always emptiness. There are silences that heal, silences that prepare, silences that strip away illusions so the soul may finally hear what noise had long concealed. Many people spend their lives terrified of stillness because stillness forces them to confront what distraction once hid. They fill every quiet moment with entertainment, conversation, ambition, or endless activity because they fear what may emerge if they are left alone with their thoughts. But eventually, every soul encounters moments where distraction fails and the deeper questions rise. What am I truly trusting in? What happens when my strength runs out? Who am I when success, applause, and control disappear? These questions unsettle the human heart because they expose how fragile many of its foundations truly are. We often build our peace upon changing circumstances and then wonder why anxiety shakes us so easily. We anchor ourselves to temporary things and become frightened when those things begin to drift. A man whose identity depends entirely upon achievement will collapse when failure comes. A man whose peace depends entirely upon financial security will live in terror of loss. A man whose worth depends entirely upon human approval will become enslaved to the opinions of others. But there is another way to live, a steadier way, a deeper way. It begins when the soul finally understands that ultimate security was never meant to rest upon human control. There is freedom in realizing that your life does not depend solely upon your own limited wisdom. The burden of omniscience was never assigned to you. You were never expected to foresee every danger, solve every mystery, or carry every outcome upon your shoulders. How exhausting it is to attempt to govern a future no human mind can fully predict. And yet anxiety constantly whispers that you must try harder. It says if you think long enough, plan carefully enough, worry intensely enough, perhaps you can prevent suffering altogether. But worry is a poor architect of peace. It builds prisons rather than shelters. There are souls listening now who have become so accustomed to stress that they scarcely remember what calm feels like. Their minds race even during moments of rest. They anticipate problems before they arrive. They replay old conversations searching for hidden meanings. They fear making mistakes because they imagine one wrong decision could ruin everything. Such souls are not merely tired in body, they are tired in spirit, and often the cruelest part is that others cannot see the battle. Invisible burdens are among the heaviest burdens of all. A broken bone receives sympathy. A troubled mind often suffers in silence. But heaven sees what others overlook, every hidden tear, every anxious night, every moment when the heart whispered desperate prayers no one else heard. And here is something the fearful soul must learn slowly, sometimes painfully. Divine care is not limited by human timing. People often assume that if help does not come immediately, help is not coming at all. But the farmer understands what the impatient soul forgets. Seeds do not bloom the moment they are planted. There are answers unfolding that you cannot yet perceive. There are dangers from which you have already been, and ends spared without ever realizing it. There are closed doors that protected you from paths that would have wounded you far more deeply than you presently understand. One day eternity may reveal how many unseen mercies surrounded your life while you believed yourself abandoned. It is strange how the human mind clings more tightly to evidence of fear than evidence of grace. One disappointment can overshadow years of provision. One unanswered prayer can make us forget countless prayers already answered. We remember storms vividly while overlooking the many times we survived them. Yet survival itself is testimony. You are still here. After all the heartbreak or the uncertainty, all the moments you thought would destroy you entirely, you are still breathing. The soul may be bruised, but it has not been forsaken. And perhaps even now, while you are listening, strength is quietly returning in ways you do not yet recognize. For renewal often enters gently rather than dramatically. We expect lightning while grace frequently arrives like dawn, slowly pushing back darkness degree by degree until suddenly the world is filled with light again. The anxious soul longs for instant transfer, formation, but growth rarely occurs that way. Even mountains are shaped gradually through years of unseen pressure and persistent wind. Why then should we imagine the shaping of the human spirit would happen without process? There are lessons trust can only learn through waiting. Waiting exposes what hurried living conceals. It reveals whether our faith was rooted in genuine surrender or merely in the expectation of immediate results. Many people believe they trust until circumstances refuse to change according to schedule. Then frustration rises, resentment grows, and fear begins speaking once more. But mature trust continues even when the road remains unclear. It says, "Though I cannot see the full design, I will not surrender myself to despair." This is not passive resignation. It is active confidence that darkness cannot erase divine intention. The world often equates strength with independence, but some of the strongest souls are those humble enough to lean upon grace. Pride insists upon self-sufficiency while wisdom recognizes limitation, and there is tremendous peace in admitting what humanity has always struggled to confess. We are finite creatures desperately in need of something greater than ourselves. No amount of intelligence can remove every uncertainty from life. No amount of wealth can guarantee tomorrow. No amount of planning can eliminate suffering entirely. The illusion of total control eventually collapses for everyone, and strangely enough, that collapse can become a doorway to freedom. For when false securities crumble, the soul finally begins searching for something unshakable. Many people spend years pursuing peace through external circumstances. They say, once this problem disappears, then I will rest. Or once my future becomes secure, then my anxiety will fade. But another problem always emerges. Another uncertainty appears. Another fear takes shape. If peace depends entirely upon circumstances, it will remain forever fragile. But there exists a deeper peace untouched by changing weather. A peace rooted not in favorable outcomes, but in eternal presence. And this peace does not mean the absence of sorrow. Even faithful hearts grieve. Even hopeful souls experience moments of trembling. The difference is that grief no longer becomes hopelessness. Pain no longer becomes permanent identity. Fear no longer rules absolutely. There is an anchor beneath the waves. The soul slowly learns that it can survive storms it once believed impossible to endure. And often the realization comes afterward rather than during the trial itself. While inside the valley, one feels weak, uncertain, and overwhelmed. But looking back later, he discovers he was being carried more than he realized. You may not yet see how this present burden is shaping you. The pressure you resent may be producing endurance. The waiting you despise may be teaching trust. The sorrow you fear may one day deepen your compassion for others who suffer. Nothing surrendered to eternal hands is wasted, not the tears, not the confusion, not even the failures. Human beings are often haunted by regret because they imagine their mistakes have permanently ruined their future. They replay old decisions endlessly, wishing they could rewrite the past. But guilt becomes destructive when it chains a soul forever to what grace intended to redeem. There are people who have asked forgiveness, yet continue punishing themselves long afterward. They carry shame like a lifelong sentence, believing they must repay emotionally what mercy already covered. But self-condemnation does not purify the soul. It only imprisons it. The heart cannot heal while constantly staring backward. And yet many do precisely this. They become trapped between fear of the future and regret over the past, leaving them unable to live fully in the present moment where grace actually meets them. Anxiety often thrives by dragging the mind away from today. It either torments you with what has already happened or terrifies you with what may happen tomorrow. Rarely does it allow the soul to rest where it currently stands. But there is remarkable wisdom in learning to live one day at a time. Not because tomorrow is unimportant, but because tomorrow does not yet belong to you. Strength is given for the present hour, and many people collapse emotionally because they attempt to carry imagined future burdens before those burdens have even arrived. The mind says, "What if everything falls apart next month? What if tragedy comes next year?" And the soul becomes exhausted fighting battles that do not yet exist. How much suffering has been created by fears of events that never happened? How many beautiful moments were lost because anxiety convinced the heart to live somewhere other than the present? There are simple mercies surrounding you even now that fear tries desperately to hide. The breath in your lungs, the quiet endurance within your spirit, the small moments of kindness that still appear amid hardship, the fact that hope itself continues whispering despite everything attempting to silence it. Darkness always exaggerates its permanence, but no night lasts forever. Even now, beyond your present understanding, movements are occurring that will eventually make sense of things currently hidden. Paths are being arranged, hearts are being shaped. Timing is unfolding with precision greater than human impatience can comprehend. One of the hardest truths for anxious people to accept is that not everything can be hurried. Certain forms of healing require time. Certain doors open only in particular seasons. Certain answers arrive only after the soul has been prepared to receive them. Impatience often interprets delay as denial, but delay is sometimes protection. A child may resent the slowness of growth, unaware that immature strength could destroy him if given too much too soon. Likewise, there are blessings that would become burdens if received before character was ready to sustain them. The soul sees fragments, eternity sees consequences, and this is why trust matters so deeply. Not blind optimism, not shallow positivity, but genuine trust rooted in the belief that even amid confusion, there remains intelligence greater than chaos and love stronger than fear. Some of you have spent so long expecting disappointment that hope itself feels dangerous. You fear trusting again because previous wounds taught you how painful loss can be. And so you guard your heart constantly, believing vigilance alone can prevent suffering. But walls built to keep pain away often keep healing away as well. The guarded soul survives, but it rarely rests. There comes a point where fear must no longer dictate the boundaries of your existence. Not because danger ceases to exist, but because the heart finally realizes that constant anxiety is not the same thing as wisdom. You cannot fully live while endlessly preparing for catastrophe, and you cannot experience peace while insisting upon absolute certainty before trusting. Faith begins precisely where certainty ends. The human heart often imagines that certainty would solve his fears. It says, if only I knew exactly how things would unfold, then I could finally rest. But even when people gain answers, anxiety frequently discovers new questions. Fear survives by constantly shifting its focus. Resolve one concern, and another emerges waiting in the shadows. This is because the deepest issue is not merely uncertainty about circumstances. It is uncertainty about whether one is ultimately held, guided, and loved within those circumstances. A man walking through darkness with a trusted companion possesses more peace than a man walking alone beneath a bright sky. Presence changes everything, and perhaps this explains why the soul longs so deeply for assurance that it is not abandoned in the chaos of existence. Beneath every fear lies a deeper question. Am I alone in this? There are moments in life when even crowded rooms cannot silence loneliness. One may sit among friends, family, co-workers, or strangers and still feel inwardly isolated. The soul aches for something beyond surface conversation. It longs for genuine refuge, and refuge is not merely escape from hardship. Refuge is the confidence that hardship does not possess final authority. The angst, Io's spirit tends to magnify temporary suffering until it appears eternal. A difficult season feels endless while one is inside it. Pain stretches time, waiting intensifies uncertainty. The heart begins whispering terrible conclusions. Nothing will change. Joy will never return. I will always feel this way. But emotions are unreliable prophets. Storms persuade the mind that sunlight has vanished permanently, yet dawn continues approaching even when clouds conceal it. Some of the most dangerous moments in life occur when temporary darkness convinces a person to make permanent conclusions. Weariness distorts perception. Fear narrows vision. The soul begins interpreting reality through exhaustion rather than truth. That is why anxious hearts must learn not to worship their feelings. Feelings are real, but they are not always reliable interpreters of reality. A frightened child may sincerely believe shadows contain monsters. His fear is genuine, yet his conclusion is false. Likewise, many fears tormenting the human soul derive their power not from truth, but from imagination untethered from trust. The mind can become a skilled architect of despair if left unchecked. It constructs elaborate futures filled with failure, humiliation, loss, rejection, and catastrophe. And then the body responds as though these imagined disasters have already arrived. Muscles tighten, sleep fades, peace disappears. What a tragedy that so many suffer repeatedly through events that never even happen. And yet the answer is not pretending life contains no danger. Life wounds people. Loss is real. Betrayal is real. Grief is real. To deny suffering entirely would be dishonest. The answer lies elsewhere. The answer lies in discovering that even suffering itself cannot separate the soul from eternal care. There is immense difference between walking through fire alone and walking through fire accompanied by one who knows the way out. Many people spend years trying to avoid every form of pain, only to discover that avoidance itself becomes another prison. Fear gradually shrinks their world. They stop risking, stop hoping, stop trusting, stop dreaming. They build emotional walls so thick that even joy struggles to enter. But safety purchased at the cost of living is not true peace. The soul was made for more than survival. It was made for trust, courage, wonder, love, and surrender. And surrender frightens modern humanity because it appears weak. Yet in reality, surrender is often the doorway to freedom. A drowning man is saved only when he stops fighting the rescuer. Likewise, the anxious soul often exhausts itself resisting the very grace trying to carry it. There are burdens you cannot solve through endless thinking. Some problems do not yield to human analysis. Some wounds cannot be healed merely through explanation. Some fears remain unconquered until the heart learns to release them rather than endlessly wrestle them. And release feels terrifying at first because control has become a false comfort. Even miserable control can seem preferable to uncertain trust. The anxious mind says, "At least if I worry constantly, I am doing something." But often the soul's deepest healing begins when it finally admits that frantic striving cannot save it. How strange that humanity continually attempts to act like gods while collapsing beneath pressures no human being was designed to carry. You were not meant to know everything. You were not meant to control everything. You were not meant to sustain your own existence through sheer mental effort. There is me. RCY in limitation, though pride rarely recognizes it. A child trusts his father to navigate roads he himself cannot understand. He does not demand knowledge of every turn before entering the car. His peace comes not from understanding the journey, but from confidence in the one leading it. Yet adults often demand from eternity explanations they would never require in ordinary relationships. We insist upon seeing the entire map before taking the next step. And when such clarity is withheld, fear rushes in to fill the silence. But trust rarely receives complete blueprints. Instead, it receives enough light for the next step. And perhaps this is intentional. For if the entire future were revealed at once, dependence would vanish. The soul would begin trusting its own knowledge rather than the wisdom guiding it. There are valleys you would never willingly enter if shown beforehand, yet those same valleys later become places where your deepest transformation occurred. There are sorrows that initially appear meaningless but eventually produce compassion impossible to develop otherwise. The broken often become healers because they understand pain in ways untouched souls cannot. Humbled often become gentle because suffering has stripped arrogance from them. The weary often become compassionate because they know what it means to struggle quietly. Nothing surrendered to divine hands remains useless forever. Even grief can become fertile ground where wisdom grows. This does not mean every suffering is easy to understand. Some wounds remain mysterious for years. Some prayers appear unanswered beyond human comprehension. There are tragedies that shake the soul deeply and leave questions lingering long after tears have dried. But mystery is not proof of absence. A child undergoing surgery may not understand why pain accompanies healing. He may interpret the experience as cruelty because his vision remains limited. Yet the surgeon sees restoration where the child perceives only suffering. Likewise, human understanding frequently mistakes incompleteness for abandonment. You are living through chapters, not the entire story. And chapters alone rarely explain everything. This is why despair becomes dangerous. Despair prematurely declares defeat before the story has finished unfolding. It stares at present darkness and assumes no future redemption could possibly emerge from it. But history repeatedly reveals how mistaken such conclusions can be. Many lives transformed the world precisely because people refused to surrender during seasons when hope seemed irrational. Had they judged reality solely by immediate circumstances, they would have quit long before breakthrough arrived. The same is true for countless quiet victories no history book records. Parents continuing despite exhaustion, souls recovering slowly after heartbreak, individuals choosing kindness despite disappointment, people rising again after failure while no audience applauds. These unseen acts of endurance possess extraordinary beauty. Heaven notices perseverance the world overlooks. The anxious heart often believes only dramatic miracles matter. Yet sometimes the miracle is simply continuing forward when everything inside urges surrender. Sometimes courage looks less like conquering mountains and more like getting out of bed while carrying invisible pain. Do not underestimate quiet endurance. There are people alive today only because they survived one unbearable hour at a time. And survival itself can become sacred. Still, the soul was not meant merely to survive forever beneath crushing anxiety. There comes a season when healing begins teaching it how to breathe again, not perfectly, not instantly, but gradually. One learns to release tomorrow little by little. One learns not to interpret every delay as disaster. One learns that thoughts need not govern reality. One learns that fear may speak loudly without speaking truthfully. And perhaps most importantly, one learns that peace is not something manufactured through human effort alone. Peace is received before it is achieved. This deeply unsettles pride because pride prefers self-sufficiency. It wants to earn serenity through perfect performance and flawless control. But true peace arrives differently. It comes as grace. Grace for the exhausted mind. Grace for the trembling heart. Grace for the person who feels he has failed too many times. Grace for the soul tired of pretending strength it no longer possesses. There is tremendous freedom in discovering that you do not need to hold your universe together alone. The stars themselves remain suspended by power far beyond human hands. Why then should you imagine your entire life depends solely upon your own ability to manage it? Anxiety shrinks the soul's vision until everything revolves around immediate fears. But trust lifts the eyes higher. It reminds the weary heart that existence is larger than present pain, larger than current confusion, larger than temporary suffering. And this broader vision changes how burdens are carried. The same storm appears different depending upon whether one believes the storm is ultimate reality or merely passing weather. Many people treat difficult seasons as permanent identities. I am anxious, I am broken, I am hopeless. But pain should never become the final definition of a person. You are more than your current struggle, more than your fear, more than your worst day, more than the mistakes still haunting your memory. And even now, beneath the stress and uncertainty, something within you continues reaching toward hope. Otherwise, you would not still be listening. The soul does not continue searching unless some hidden part of it still believes light exists somewhere beyond the darkness. Protect that hope carefully. The world contains enough voices eager to feed despair. There are countless influences teaching people to expect ruin, distrust goodness, and surrender to cynicism. But cynicism is not wisdom. It is woundedness masquerading as intelligence. The cynical heart calls hope naive because disappointment once injured it deeply. Yet refusing hope does not eliminate pain. It merely guarantees emptiness. Hope remains one of the bravest acts a human being can choose. Not shallow optimism pretending evil does not exist, but stubborn confidence that evil does not ultimately triumph. And sometimes this hope survives only as a faint ember. A weary soul may not feel triumphant. It may barely possess enough strength to whisper a prayer. Yet even trembling faith possesses remarkable power because its strength does not depend entirely upon human emotion. There will be days when you feel strong and days when you feel fragile. Days when trust comes naturally and days when fear returns heavily. Do not mistake these fluctuations for failure. Healing rarely moves in straight lines. Even recovering hearts experience storms. The important thing is not perfection but persistence. Returning again and again to trust despite uncertainty, choosing not to surrender completely to despair even when emotions fluctuate wildly. For slowly, over our time, the soul changes through what it repeatedly chooses. And every moment you choose trust over panic, surrender over control, hope over despair, something within you grows steadier, not instantly visible perhaps, but real nonetheless, like roots deepening underground before branches ever rise into view. And so, as you leave this moment and step once more into the ordinary battles of life, remember this truth with all the strength your weary heart can gather. The weight you have been carrying was never meant to crush you. The fears that follow you through the night, the uncertainty that keeps your mind restless, the burdens that have stolen your peace for so long, they are not greater than the hands that hold your life together even now. There is a God who is not intimidated by your chaos. He is not confused by your circumstances, not delayed by your weakness, not overwhelmed by the complexity of your future. While you tremble over tomorrow, He already stands in it. While you struggle to understand the road ahead, He sees the destination clearly. And even in moments when you feel forgotten, unseen, or emotionally exhausted, heaven has not turned away from you for a single second. One day you will look back upon this season that nearly broke you, and you will realize that what felt like abandonment was actually preparation. What felt like silence was not absence at all. What felt like delay was mercy working quietly behind the veil of your understanding. The very burden that drove you to your knees may become the place where your soul finally learned to trust. So tonight, stop carrying what only God can carry. Stop punishing your mind by trying to control every outcome. Stop believing that fear is protecting you when it is only draining the life from your spirit. Release the future into the hands of the one who has never failed to sustain creation itself. The storm may still rage for a while. Questions may remain unanswered. The road may still seem uncertain. But your peace does not have to wait for perfect circumstances anymore. Because peace was never meant to come from having all the answers. Peace comes from knowing that the one who walks beside you is greater than anything standing against you. And perhaps that is the greatest freedom a human soul can ever discover, that even when you are weak, even when you are afraid, even when your heart it's tired beyond words, you are still being carried by a love strong enough to hold together every broken piece of your life.